One of the things that helps us to better understand our theories is to look at border conditions and to particularly look at what is not part of the theory. So if we want to posit the idea of transformational leadership, we have to look at what is not transformational leadership. And so Burns and others who came up with these ideas around transformational leadership suggested that the opposite, the boundary condition, is actually transactional leadership. Now, transactional leadership is actually made up of a number of different types of leadership. The first, and this is probably what they originally were talking about when they talked about transactional leadership, is the idea of contingent rewards. Rewards that are contingent upon the followers doing a thing, right? So these are incentives. This is pay. The idea that there is a transaction, a contract, maybe even a social contract between leaders and followers, and that the act of leading and following is actually a transaction. The follower does something in the expectation of being paid or getting some reward in return. They also came up with the idea of management by exception. And here it is where the manager essentially leaves the followers alone and allows them to do their own thing, but steps in when there is a problem. So by exception. And then this is further broken down into two ideas: the active management by exception and passive management by exception. Active management by exception is about enforcing rules or taking a look at things and stepping in before followers and plans get off the rails. Basically being proactive about that stepping in. Passive management by exception is waiting until someone fails and then correcting after and stepping in after the fact. That's what we mean by passive management by exception. And look, I think that we would say, even though we have this idea that followers want a transformational leader, when you ask followers what they want, it's often this: I want the leader to leave me alone, give me the autonomy to do my own work. We're really talking there about this management by exception. And then they also came up with this idea of what's called laissez-faire leadership, which is leave it alone, let it lie. And really what that comes down to is not leading. So we can understand these then as part of a continuum of leadership. And this is what has become known as the full range of leadership model. The laissez-faire leader here avoids involvement. Again, this is not leading. The management by exception passive is about putting out fires. Management by exception active is about monitoring for mistakes so that fires don't start, but otherwise staying out of it, essentially. Contingent reward systems are about using rewards in order to guide leadership. And then finally, you have the 5 I's of transformational leadership, where we build trust and we act with integrity and we inspire people, etc. So you can see these are laid out in kind of the ineffective to effective, passive to active. Laissez-faire, very passive form of leadership, essentially not leading, also very ineffective. Management by exception, passive, also somewhat passive, better than laissez-faire, but not by much, also not very effective. All the way up to then the 5 I's of transformational leadership as being this very involved leader who is also very effective. And so this really raises questions about having a hands-off approach to leadership. This would suggest that we really need to be more involved as leaders. So that's something to think about that transformational leadership tells us. Now, I say all this about transformational leadership, and I want to kind of get to the core of it, that transformational leadership is really about increasing the followers' commitment to the leader and to the organization. So if you remember back to lectures on motivation and this idea of followers having a commitment to the leader, that's really what transformational leadership is about. It's about followers who identify with the leader and with the leader's vision. And part of it is about having these heightened emotional levels, to having the feeling special and being excited about being part of the leader's vision. Ultimately, it's about being willing to subordinate my own personal needs to that of the leader in the recognition that he or she represents something bigger than just me. But at the same time, even as I'm willing to subordinate myself to the leader, I also feel this feeling of empowerment. So when we look at transformational leaders and we look at what is brought about by them, these are the things that they bring about in their followers. They increase their followers' commitment to the leader and to the organization. Now, if we look at situational influences, right? So remember early on, we've talked all semester about the impacts of the situation on transformational leadership. And so what we need to understand is that in a crisis, people look for transformational leaders. When we are not in a crisis moment, when things are just mundane day to day, we're not looking for large changes and larger than life transformational leaders who are going to make us special. But when we are in crisis, then we are looking for those transformational leaders. And we are what we might call charisma hungry, where we want that charismatic, strong leader who's going to help us get out of crisis. Another thing that can support transformational leadership is social networks, frankly. Stronger social networks help tell the tale of the charismatic leader, of that leader who is special. And we hear it from our friends and our colleagues. In that Braveheart clip and in that Braveheart movie, what's not shown in the clip is the telling of the stories of William Wallace that then lead the followers to think of him as this larger than life character. And so social networks, when there are strong networks across an organization, that helps tell the tale of these charismatic transformational leaders that then support the rise of these transformational leaders. And then also time. There takes time for this to build, for the leader to be able to build these relationships and build out a vision and express that vision, and people come to understand and identify with that vision. Look, that all takes time, which then on the other hand brings us to the idea of there are times to use transactional leadership when there's not enough time, when we have not yet built the relationships and the social networks that we need. For instance, the very first day of I-Day is the plebes just need to get on the bus, right? They're finishing an alumni hall and they just need to get on the bus. That is not the time for transformational leadership and inspirational motivation and we're going to get on the bus for God and country and motherhood and apple pie. No, it's just get on the bus. Like, we get on because I told you to. This legitimating tactic with it that's very transactional. Because look, there's not time. There's no need to build this relationship. Just get on the bus. It's going to be fine. And look, finally, what I would say, and this may be my most important point, transactional leadership and transformational leadership should be thought of as complementary to each other. And actually, when we've gone in and done research around transformational leadership behaviors and transactional leadership behaviors, what we find is it's not an either or. It turns out it's a both and. And this goes back again to that very idea that leadership effectiveness is about accomplishing the mission, and it's about taking care of followers. That both of those things have to happen. So yes, be transformational, be inspirational, but at the same time, be transactional. Focus on what needs to be done to accomplish the mission, plan, make sure the logistics are taken care of, do the mundane managerial tasks that are going to help bring about mission accomplishment, that are going to help bring about taking care of your people. We can't just spend all of our time being inspirational. We actually have to get the job done, which means that there's going to be a complement of being what some might pejoratively call transactional, while at the same time being a special leader and taking care of people.